So last session, we were getting into turning of mind inside us. That's basically to understand who am I. So what we are trying to find is we have been taught to look at the outside world every time. And during this course of time, we have lost lots of sense of faculties. And some of these faculties like introspection, internal analysis had been lost in this process. So there are multiple techniques which is being used to find who our individuality is and what is the reality behind it. And one such technique is seer seen analysis. And that's what we started looking into it last time. Okay. Okay, so let's look into this seer seen analysis. So this is a pretty simple concept. The idea is basically we are trying to transition from from what we know to what we do not know, and then we keep slowly moving through this process. Through this process, we have to understand three different rules. The seer and seen are different. So we started looking at last time, but let's go into a little bit details now. So we took an example of I, and we said I is the seer. I is seeing multiple different things. So I is the subject here, and multiple different things are all the objects. So both are different, and I don't think there should be any confusion for us in it, and it's pretty clear in here. Seer is one, and seen are many. Here, this one is also simple. I as a single entity, that subject is only one, but the objects are many because the I one time is seeing the window, the I other time is seeing a furniture, and there are multiple different objects which is being seen. So seer is one as an entity, and seen are many. The third one is seer is unchanged. So seer remains constant in here, and seen is changing. So our seer right now is the I here, but the seen is changing. What this really means is whatever I am seeing outside the window, that's not the same what it used to be a couple of weeks back, or even a couple of months back, right? Things seems to change. So the furniture before it was looking different, but now it is different. But the seer is remaining constant in here. So that is what is meant by seer is unchanged and seen is changing. So this is what's going to happen. We are just going to replace the seer and seen with multiple different objects and multiple different subjects and objects, and keep on rolling this. So that is why it's important to understand these three base simple ones. So seer, seen, both are different, no question. I different from the rest of the objects. Seer is one, entity is one. There are many different things which the eyes are seeing. Seer is constant and seen is changing. Okay. So hopefully everybody is with me on this. So now we have to apply this question in here, or if you can say you want to apply this equation in here, right? Anything which we know of or in our experience is not us. So this is like a super rule which goes on top of this. So once this three has been gone through, this is the next question to ask ourselves is, hey, is this seer in my experience? So what we are thinking right now is about the I, and I is our seer here, and is seer in my experience. And of course, yes, I know that if there is an issue with my eye, it clearly, I can feel that. When my eyes are burning, I can feel it. When it is not clear, I know that there is a problem. So this is something which can be experienced. This seer, which is the I here, is something which can be experienced. And anything in our experience is not me. So if you're able to experience anything, that's not you. So based on this, the next question which should come is, what is really experiencing it? Right? So the question here is, what is really experiencing the seer? Is it something which is experiencing the seer in here, which is our I? That should be simple, right? So that is basically the mind. So the mind is the one which is responsible and is saying that, oh, you know what, this is how my eyes are tired, my eyes are burning, I'm not able to see well. So all those things are being experienced in the mind in here. The eye responsibility is basically just to see the objects and nothing else at this time. Right? So it is the mind which is the experiencer, which is experiencing the eyes. So what happens here is, this is where we transition slowly the seer from the eye to the mind. Similarly, this could be done for other tattvas too. We could do it for nose, we could do it for skin, we could do it for any faculties. So right now, let's keep with this process. So the seer, right now, we have said that, oh, you know what, mind is basically what's able to understand and know what my eyes are doing. So it's transitioning. So the seer now becomes the mind, and the seeing are the different objects. So now so now we have come to this point where the seer is mind. So what happens with mind? Is the I the only object which is giving input to the mind? It's not the case, right? So the mind gets input from eyes, ears, nose, skin. So there are multiple other sense organs and faculties which are feeding into the mind. So those are all the seen now, and the seer becomes the mind. So we started with I first as a seer. The scenes were the external things outside, and now the seer is the mind, and the seen are the indriyas. So the parts, the body parts, right, the sense organs, which actually provides as an input to the seer. So now, is the seer and seen different? Which means, is the mind different from the rest of the sense organs? Is what we are answering, because we are just going to still follow that same rule, right? We're just going to keep on following the same rule and continuing this process of moving the seer and seeing. And the goal is basically to find who am I, and we apply the super rule. So we ought to always keep this as a template and slowly start asking questions and answering. So that's what we are doing in here. So the seer is the mind here. The seen are the other sense organs. Are they both different? Is the mind different than rest of the sense organs? Yes, obviously it's different. I think we should be clear in here. Seer is one and seen are many. So the mind is only one, but we are seeing multiple things. How? So the mind is only one, but it's getting fed. The data is getting a flow. The flow is through the eyes. So we are seeing something, we understand something. We are listening through our ears. We get some other information. We feel something through the skin. So the seen are multiple in here, right? But the seer is still the same. The seer is still our mind. That's the only one on mind at this point of time. The subject is still one, but the seen are many. Okay. Next, the seer is unchanged and the seen is changing. So the mind remains constant in here, where after some time, even eyes actually, we can have cataracts, or we could have a short sight or a long sight, or there might be issues with the skin, wrinkles at some point of time. So eczema or whatever it is can come in the skin. So the scene is going to change in here. The objects which are feeding to the mind is going to get changed in here, right? So those things are changing. Are we clear with this? Just want to make sure that we are all on the same page. Okay, fine. So we have gone through those 3 rules, but what is the super rule which we try to impose on it and say, is this in my experience, right? So is mind in my experience? Am I able to know it? Do I feel it, right? Is everything happen? Can I realize it? Thinking about all these things, yeah, mind is in my experience. I'm sad when something didn't go my way. When I'm happy when everything is going whatever, you know, is pleasing me, right? So we can identify when we are in a good mood. That's what we refer to as, oh, I'm in a good mood, I'm not in a good mood. Those things are all which are references back to the mind. So I'm not feeling that I should do this thing. So it's like all those things are part of the mind, right? So the mind is in our experience in here. So since the mind is in our experience, what do? Mind is not me. So the mind is not me in here, and the seer, what is right now, what we have taken is basically the mind, right? Seer is our mind in here, and we had said like, oh, you know what, mind is in my experience. So by the rule, we can say that, oh, mind is not me. So what is experiencing the mind is the next question to be asked in here. And what is experiencing the mind? So we get, we're worried of something at times. Sometimes, you know, it's not the same. It just fluctuates, all those things. It's in that's in our experience. But what is experiencing that one? What is experiencing those feelings? What is experiencing the mind? What is the witness? Basically, is our question. So that witness is going to be the seer, right? And the mind is going to be the seen now. So that witness, what is experiencing this, is nothing but our soul. And what it is seeing right now is it is getting all the data from the mind, right? So seer is the soul and the multiple characters and the changing mind. So those things are many. So here soul is definitely different than the mind. And also soul is not changing. But the mind is definitely changing, right? Its characters are changing. So this is the process of basically flipping that seer and seen to multiple different subjects and objects. And what we could do is, the idea is basically to understand that I'm not the body in here. I'm not the mind in here. I'm not any of the feelings in here, because we are witnessing the feelings in here. Because the mind is what is witnessing, or mind is what is experiencing it. But there is an experiencer, or there is a witness, which is our soul. And that soul basically is witnessing it. It is like us watching a movie. And a distance gets created between the witness and the mind when we go over this process for all the faculties, for all the 96 faculties, what is being said, like all the senses, all the feelings, the nerves, the air, the skin, the bone, the blood, everything can be taken through this process and repeatedly gone through the seer scene. So the idea here is a distance between the soul and the mind is coming in here, because the mind is what has been experiencing everything, and there is something which is not in our experience at this point of time, which is just watching it. It's watching the sadness, it's watching the anger, it is witnessing the whole situation, and the one which is witnessing the soul is ever at bliss. So the soul is constant, it never changes. And finally, that's what we are going to find out of it. All the emotions coming in through the mind is getting changed, but the soul actually just remains constant through this thing. So this witness, which is our soul, which is not changing, remains constant, is covered by our body and is also covered by our mind in here. And this soul is said that it cannot be experienced, or it cannot be seen. And we cannot experience something and we cannot see it, right? So once we go through this process and once we experience it, that the game is over, we are in a totally different level once we have experienced that part, that soul. But at this point, it is not in the experience. And it's also said that it's not even easy to experience, because Perumal actually has a beautiful saying actually. Sathiya Vedantam ellam Siddhantam ellam Tanithani mel unardum unardum Tannai unardar karidam. So what it tells is, one might know, one might feel, one might understand all the Siddhantam, all the Vedantam, everything. But to understand oneself is not going to be the same. It's not exactly the same as one we know theoretically, because one might say like, okay, fine, you know what, I understand all this process. I know all these things in theory. So does this mean that I know who am I? Do I know the real myself? Do I know the reality? No, these are all indirect knowledge. It's not the feeling, it's not the experience. So these indirect knowledges will help us, but they're definitely, we can't say that now I know who I am, right? We know the part, we understand how to go by it. Then Perumal also adds, right? Other than soul, nothing else has life. The soul is the one which drives the intellect, which in turn torches the mind, and it reaches the senses. And these are basically mere reflections of our soul. Those are just experiences, just like our mirror reflecting us. These things are just reflecting us. So if we go back to the first session, so now we went through this analysis of how to find who am I. But if we go back, we spoke about this one: knowledge in Sarya, knowledge in Kiriya, knowledge in Jnanam, knowledge in Yogam, and knowledge in Jnana, right? So basically the first one, knowledge in Sarya, is listening, trying to get all the information, right? The second one is thinking. So we basically think about that. Knowledge in Kriya, then knowledge in Yoga. So once we start thinking through it, we'll be confused. We'll be, that's normal. And you have to be confused. And that's common. It's going to happen if we think about it. The confusion is not going to go away fast. It's not just going to go away with a couple of questions. So that confusion needs to get clarified, rectified, right? So that is yoga. So after that comes the knowledge in knowledge. So it's one after the other. So every step has an ending to it. The listening process, so the understanding process, the clarification process of it, and the experiencing process of it, right? So this is also called Sravanam, Mananam, Nidityasanam, actually. And this process of trying to get into ourselves and trying to see us inside is not to say that it is pretty straightforward. It might take multiple tries to even get into something, or to make a sense out of it. And it comes through practice only. So right now what we are saying is basically the goal here was just to find that, okay, I'm not the body, I'm not the mind, I'm not the feelings. So what am I? I am the soul, right? If we think about it, when the body, right, for every single person, the body is different. Everybody is not going to look like, they're different. So we have our differences there. Same thing with mind too. It's subjective. Everybody's thought processes are different. It's going to change there. But it is said that when looking from the soul's perspective, everybody is one and the same. And that is where oneness comes into the picture. And that's why all great souls and saints have been focusing on these concepts of oneness once they understood who they are, because they see their reality. The one which is deep rooted into us is in terms of body or in terms of mind. We play different roles. We identify ourselves with different roles. We go to office, then I identify myself with someone, with my role, what I play in the office. I come home, then I might be identifying myself as a family man, right, as a husband. I go to the association, I identify myself as a different role in there, secretary, treasurer, or whatever it is. So all these things are different, but there is one which is common in everything, right? That is the soul. That's the one which we are talking to and referring to. So it's like ornaments, right? The bangle could be different, the ring could be different, those ornaments could be different, but the underlying truth about the gold remains the same. So gold is the main one, right? So the summary here of all these things is the associations between these objects, the scene, is what we are basically focusing on. And once we focus on the seer, the subject, which is the real existence, then the reality would kick in. So when knowledge comes in, ignorance goes through the window. That's what basically happens, right? So we can actually go over one incident, which is basically again another reinforcement of this same point. This is what happens. So this was actually given by one of Perumal's student called Kandasamy Pillai. This is an incident which happened in Kadalur. And there's one person who who in Brahma Samaj, his name is Sambedu Sridhara Naikar. So he was preaching that Brahman can be experienced in mind and Brahman can be felt through mind. So there were some confusions by some of the students or some of the people who were listening, right? Listening to those speeches, and they want to clarify that. And they invited Perumanar. Perumanar in one of this occasion where Perumanar was giving a beautiful explanation on how this is, and this actually follows in line with what we are talking about, right? And Perumanar is asking the question: how could you feel your soul using mind, right? So right now, what was our last step? Is soul. We got stuck with it because we weren't able to feel it, right? Because we don't know, we don't experience it, right? So just see if that actually aligns in here, right? And if there is a continuation in here. So Perumanar actually asks a question in here, like, oh, how could you feel Brahman using a mind? Brahman is Godhead, right? How could you feel Godhead using mind? So this person, Sambedu Sridhara Naikar, actually says like, oh, you know what? You would be able to experience. You'll be able to experience a little bit, at least through your mind. And Perumanar is saying here that if there is anything which can be experienced by mind, it would be experienced. So there will be experiences on the other senses as well. So the I would have some kind of experience if the mind experiences something. The same thing, you know, there might be some experience with the sense of touch, right? So the thing which would be experienced by mind would also be experienced by the senses as well, right? And Perumanar here actually puts another very main point in here, right? The body and mind are made of Maya. So, and Brahman, the God, actually is beyond Maya. And if we try to understand something which is in the realms, which is bounded inside the Maya, it cannot experience which is something beyond the Maya, right? So the body and mind, since it is actually bounded by this Maya, it will not be experiencing Brahman, which is beyond that. But then the next question comes, someone asks there, right? Oh, so how could we even experience then? I mean, if I can't experience in my mind, how else could we experience it? Very good question, very valid question. So Perumanar says here, when the mind is calm only, Brahman can be experienced. Even if there is a small mind which comes into the existence, soul's intellect is not going to work. And if the soul's knowledge cannot be experienced, Brahman cannot be realized. Does this make sense? So, okay, we'll go one more time. So when the mind is calm, or when there is basically no existence of mind in here, that is only when the soul's intellect is going to work. And through the soul's knowledge is how basically Brahman can be experienced. Even if there is a small mind coming in, that knowledge will not be experienced. So Perumanar also says in one more place, like Durguna Mayai poi tolaindadu, Jnanam tondrida ponvoli totriya kadirdan. So once this Maya had gone only, right? Then only now, then the divine knowledge is there. Or you can even say the divine knowledge, right? When the divine knowledge comes in, Maya is gone, right? So Marulodu Mai Poi Thoraindade. In other places he puts it like that too. So the ignorance is gone. Once the Maya, the ignorance, that the Maya is same thing as ignorance, basically. So that thing is totally gone. Okay. Let us see what Perumanar is saying about this soul, what we have been trying to stress. Right? Who am I? So I am soul, but we haven't really realized it, right? That's still the key point here. So I am soul. I am shaped as a small atom. So atom actually can't be even seen through microscope, right? So I'm soul shaped as a small atom. It possesses millions of sun potential. So that possesses millions of sun's potential. So the potential is there. It doesn't mean that it is doing right now. So it is latent. It is hidden. So we have to basically unearth it. We have to dig it and take it out, basically. So the potential is there. So that's why it possesses millions of sun's potential. And it resides in the center of head. That's called Lalada. So that's why, at least in 1,000 places, Perumal are saying, Sirchabai, 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 focus your attention there, put your attention there, just always concentrate in there. That is one reason. Why? It's always been stressed, right? And that's the reason why we had all those indications, right, of putting the tirni or the ashes, right, in our forehead in this area. So anyway, so now we saw what was Perumal referring to as soul, and hopefully everybody experiences it at some point of time, and that is the goal, basically. That is called Thannai Arida, right? And through that is how you understand God. And now we know why it's important to get that knowledge to even get to the next step. Otherwise, we can do whatever we want, but ultimately we cannot understand, right? That's the reality behind it. I mean, that direct understanding is not going to be there. Okay, let's look into this thing. It's a pretty interesting one. It's called as a great sermon, or Peruvadesam. So Perumal, before his unification of God, a couple of months back, before his unification, gave this great sermon, which basically also aligns with what we are talking to. So what we are trying to do is just to reinforce the same point over and over again, right, in multiple different ways to understand that. So let's see here. So the way he starts is, it's a pretty interesting way he starts it. Hereafter, don't waste your time, right? So from here on now, do not waste your time. Is how he starts with that. And this has been this has not been recorded by him, but this has been really recorded by the people who have been, taking notes. So not wasting time here is also a very good, I mean, thinking through that. I mean, everybody goes through the same routine of waking up in the morning, and everybody has their own routine. We do. So the question here is how that routine is. What are we doing in our routine, right? And once in a year, we want to take a New Year's resolution, and then we probably, I don't know, probably flies the next 20 days, 30 days, or probably a quarter. And then we might even forget what happens to all those New Year's resolution, right? So all those things happen. Time flies. Weeks turn to months, months turn to years. Year turns faster too. By the time we know, kids are all growing faster too. It tells something. So the essence, the time is also essence of a time, even though God is not bounded by time. This is what in Jiva attain we started again with this same exact thing in the first session, because people who had taken this human body need to achieve the soul's ultimate gain. This is how we started with, before the lifetime. And the soul's ultimate gain is to attain God's natural ecstasy, right? Without being bounded by any objects, space, and live an incomparable extended life. So that's basically the goal, the ultimate goal of the soul, to reach in a lifetime. So here, in this great sermon, Perumal talks about Vicharam. So Vicharam is split into two. In Tamil, we say Vicharam is basically referring to as sorrow or misery. Or it always refers to that. But Perumal says that's wrong. It's divided into two, V plus Charam. Charam basically is the sorrow or misery, but the V actually is the remedy of the sadness or the sorrow. So Vicharam is basically the remedy of sadness, but actually it's now in ulta, right? It's turned the other way around. So things are different anyway. So Vicharam is the remedy for sadness. That's what Vicharam means. And there are two types of Vicharam. So this is one interesting thing. Let's start with this. If we actually, what happened was last week, we came through this ingredient called carmine in a food product. And this ingredient is was actually triggering my curiosity. I was like, I haven't seen this ingredient, right? So looking into this ingredient, it is a red colored dye. It's a red pigment. Right? It's used in food products like yogurt, ice creams, candy, juices. Most famous brands have it. Not just that. It's used in cosmetics like lipsticks, blushes, the things, you know, what they put in here, the eyeshadows, the nail polishes, right? Why? To get that red pigment. So it's used in cosmetic, it's used in food products, it's even used in dyeing woolen clothes or threads too, right? It's a common dye, basically. It's a red dye. It goes by different names: carmine, carminic acid, natural red 4. That was another tricky name. You know, they normally can come with all these names. Natural red 4. Think about this. Natural red 4, because it's red in color, and it's and you know it looks pretty good because it's a color of a strawberry, right? It's a strawberry color. It gives a pretty good attracting color in the ice creams, candy, all the red candies and juices. So take a look at your ingredients and see if you can find it. The main thing comes here. That is, what is that carmine? That it basically is what's called as a cochineal insect. It's true. It's a bug. It's a cochineal bug. What they take is, they basically grab this thousands and thousands of bugs and they actually kill them, dry them, however it is, powder them. And once it is powdered, it just turns to completely red color thing. And then when activated with water, right, when it's mixed with water, it just gives this fluorescent red color. And what they had found is this color is not detrimental, or it doesn't deteriorate when it goes through heat or light, right? The color still stands out. So that's why this color got added. It's pretty much anything red actually in these days. So, but anyway, the point here is all this kind of vicharam is called as the worldly vicharam, right? Whatever we are talking is worldly vicharam. It might be good for our daily life. On the spiritual aspect, Perumal says, this is not at all vicharam. This is not at all vicharam. So what he says is called as Paravicharam. Paravicharam is what is the real Vicharam. And the real Vicharam, he says, basically without thoughts on worldly events. So there should not be any thoughts in us when doing this kind of Paravicharam, right? This self-inquiry, right? And with that prerequisite, what we are trying to do is we are trying to compare the state of oneself, the state of ignorance, with the state of the omnipresence, right? So with the state of Godhead. And we are trying to criticize, we are trying to look at the shortcomings of ourselves with all of our issues and praise the God at the same time. Perumal says this vichara will help to remove the curtain of Maya, which is enclosing our soul. And what is this Maya? The Maya is basically our bad characters, right? The characters in ourselves. So the lust, the anger, desire, delusion, pride, jealousy, all those things are gone. What it does is it gives a heat, what's called as Suttha Ushnam, or it's called as latent heat. This is the heat which is responsible for removing our Maya in us. That's what Perumal says. And that could be done through this divine self-inquiry without having the thoughts on worldly events, but comparing with ourself to God. So this is how it basically works. And also it says, you got to practice this continuously with good effort, because the continuity and effort makes sense, because initially when we start to see criticize ourselves or of our shortcoming, it's kind of tough to criticize oneself. It's not going to come through. So practicing it continuously with good effort is really important in here, as said by Perumal. So here, the challenges which we might encounter when going is, we are under the control of sense most of the day, right? So it might not listen during inquiry. We might always get distracted. So disciplines are to our rescue. Discipline of the food. We had seen all those things in pretty detail, and it's been recorded. I think we did 5 or 6 sessions just on food. Maybe a couple of sessions just on mind. Discipline on mind, which Perumal has said. Discipline of life or Jiva. Discipline on soul. So all those disciplines help us basically to practice it. And it's also said, and also Perumal says this, like, if we can imagine thousands and thousands of cards which has all those books in it, all those knowledge can be inherited within just a second, right, with His grace. So it is possible. So the process is going to take time, but once the process is there, to get it is quite easier. It's just a matter of seconds we are talking about. So with this, actually, I think I have to cut short lots of things, but with this, I hope it gives us some good overall understanding about body, our mind, and how our soul is, and how everything is hiding it from seeing the Godhead. And, you know, it kind of clarifies the thought process, or probably creates more and more question. Either way, that's also a good thing, to create more and more question and confusion. That's because the first sign actually that you're thinking. So either way, thanks everybody, and thanks for arranging it. Arutperumjothi.
Arutperumjothi.